Hello and welcome back to the Toffee YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name's Thomas, joined again by Terry and David. Today, another player review. This time, probably one of the only player reviews that are actually going to be mainly positive this season. Haven't had too many of them. Mason Holgate, of course, last season went on loan to West Brom. Did all right there, came back, was probably expecting to be second fiddle. He's already mentioned kind of in an Everton interview that he was maybe expecting to go back out on loan. Apparently he had that discussion with Marcel Brands that he didn't really see a place for himself in the starting 11. He's broken into the starting 11 absolutely brilliantly. Some might say it to become our best centre-back now, but we're going to come to that later. Starting with David, what were your kind of expectations for Holgate coming into this season?
In short, no. We've held our hands up. A few of us discussed this at the start of the season on our podcast. He had a fairly average season in the Championship on loan, and for someone who's actually been a staunch supporter of Dominic Calvert-Lewin to say give him time, I was actually the opposite way around on Holgate, which is a bit hypocritical, really. It's taught me a lot of lessons watching how he's developed this season. My doubt with Holgate was simply where'd you play him. I didn't think he was big enough, broad enough to play centre half in the Premier League. A couple of the games I've seen him play in the League Cup against lower down opposition, I think he struggled there. And also at right back, I didn't think he was dynamic enough to play at full back. I possibly see that he could possibly play a part in a back three, but at the time it looked unlikely that we were playing it. So I didn't actually have a lot of expectations, and it's probably a big lesson to be learned for not just me, but many other Evertonians who may have written him off at the start of the season. What can be done if you give the youth a chance and you stand by them.
Yeah, and over to you, Terry. What were your expectations from coming into the season?
Exactly the same. I think it was January or February. I put on Twitter of it was like a gif of The Simpsons where they're pulling a chair up to like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where and I put my name's Terry McAllister and I was a Mason Holgate doubter. And the County Road Bobblers account got straight back to me, replied and said, "Yeah, pull up a chair for." Well, because whereas when I didn't see it with Holgate, I'd much like David, I didn't see where he played. I didn't think he was big enough to be a centre back. I didn't think he was good enough going forward to be a full back. I thought, like yourselves, that a back three might suit him, the right hand side of the back three, because that was the only position he'd excelled in prior to that. But he's proved, he's had such a turnaround this season. He's proved the doubters, and myself included, completely wrong, because he's come in, he's made that centre back position his own, and he's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't he? Like we weren't making it up. He was, a bit ropey before this season. His positioning wasn't great. He was even, a bit dodgy on one of the goals for Lincoln earlier in the season. I think it was the very first goal, like the very first minute, or his positioning wasn't very good. But then he just, much like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, it gets less headlines because he's not scoring goals. But when Duncan Ferguson took over, he just sort of, the jet boosters got put on his progression, and he just grabbed hold of the opportunity and established himself in the team. And now, I think going into next season, it's quite a safe assumption to think he's going to be the number one centre back. If we buy one, it's going to be partnered with him until further notice. I can't see him going back to the bench, because even after lockdown, when he picked up his injury, the team's defensive performance has dropped off. They didn't drop off a cliff because Jared Branthwaite came in and played well, but they weren't as good without him.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely my kind of impressions of him coming into this season, I thought he was destined to kind of become another Luke Garbett, another Callum Connolly, a player that looked all right at a certain level, wasn't really going to make it. But he's proven all three of us wrong. I'm not too fussed about that. I'm quite glad that he's proved us wrong. I think there's been time and time again where maybe we've called a young player to do well, hasn't really materialised, but clearly Holgate's proved a lot of his doubters wrong this season. And Terry's just mentioned there that he thinks he might be kind of the number one centre-back going into next season. Do you agree with that, David?
100%. He's filled out a lot. He had that bit of aggression in him, as we see him, and he threw Bobby Firmino for the echo in the crowd. So he's always had a bit of aggression, but he's actually physically filled out now. He's bold, he's brave. He's good on the ball. His stats add up. You listen to Rio Ferdinand talk about him the other day, described him as a potential elite centre back. He can take teams out the game when he drives the ball forward and he moves it forward fast. It's everything that we're missing. And then when you add to that the fact that he hasn't really had any protection in front of him in central midfield, that only kind of highlights what a player he's been. And we've needed his athleticism because we've struggled really with having athletic players in that spine, and he's got that in abundance as well. So without doubt, he's a starter next year, and it just shows you what we can do. A bit of faith sometimes with these lads, and it's a lesson learned from me. And sometimes, if you look, we spent nearly 50 million on Mina and Keane. We may, if Jags would have signed that contract, we may have moved Holgate on, or we got Rojo on the deadline day, and spent more money maybe that wasted. It just shows you sometimes you don't need to spend a bag full of money. You just need to empower the players that are already there and believe in them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, Terry, you kind of mentioned when Duncan Ferguson came in, he did kind of propel himself into the first team. Maybe not in the way some of us expected, obviously away to Manchester United, kind of going into central midfield. How impressed were you kind of with his versatility at that point? Because obviously, as we've all mentioned, we all had doubts whether he could play centre-back, let alone right-back, let alone central midfield, really. Kind of how impressed were you with him in that game?
I mean, his flexibility, never mind how much it's impressed me, it's probably impressed Carlo Ancelotti, because there was a spell when, in the middle of, was it February, where every single game for the past, 15 games, 20 games, Holgate had played every one of them. He was the only player who hadn't come out the team. And he played midfield against Man United, which took everyone by surprise because the formation on the Sky graphic and everything was 3 at the back, and Dunk pulled a fast one. But then people don't remember he went and played for a spell of the game at left back against Newcastle away as well. And obviously we know he can play right back, and I think that has appealed to Carlo. That his versatility is not something like, I'll play him in lots of positions, but it shows his how fluid he is as a footballer. Like, he's good on the ball. He's physically got the the attributes now, and he's adaptable. That's what Carlo seems to like in players. He's talked about he doesn't want a team to have one identity. So why would he want players to have one identity? He probably likes players who can, if I get an injury at left back and I've got no one on the bench, then I can just shunt Holgate across and he'll acquit himself and we'll see the game out. And he's made himself indispensable to the team. If you look up the spine of the team, there's only a couple of players now who are nailed on starters, and I think there's the big 4 of players, the 2 strikers, Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, Luca Dean, and I think Mason Holgate are the 4 guaranteed starters in this team, and no one else is safe apart from maybe Pickford, but that's another matter.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, coming into the season, I definitely didn't expect to see him playing in central midfield. I didn't expect to see him playing at all, as we all mentioned, but he fit into the role brilliantly, and it almost got to a point during kind of the restart, that kind of period of football that seems like it was the biggest whirlwind that we'll kind of ever see. It almost seemed like the midfield at one point needed Holgate more than the defence did. There was a lot of shouts for him, to be fair, to kind of move in the midfield before he got injured, which I think says a lot about his character, and it's good to see young players coming up. And, I've heard Terry mention it in a couple of videos and podcasts now. It's important for young players coming up to just say, you know what, I'm just going to go anywhere. It might not be your most natural position, but to kind of break yourself into the team, it's so important to kind of just get anywhere and just show how good you are. And obviously Holgate has been brilliant to the extent that we all kind of agree he is the number 1 centre-back. Over to you, David, now. Kind of, if he's the number 1 centre-back, who are you starting next to him at the start of next season?
Again, next season, we've already seen marginal gains in terms of set pieces, the way our defence, has improved under Carlo Ancelotti. That will only improve again, in my opinion. Even if we don't bring anyone else in there, I would like to see us get Gabriel. And if that's the case, it would be a very balanced back 4. We'll have a left footer in there, and we'll have someone else with pace. So I think we are looking for someone there. We're looking for someone who's got a natural fit and and a left foot. If not, I think he may look outside Zuma. So whoever we bring in, I do think that's who will play there. Would I have any kind of major concerns about Mina or Keane starting next season? Probably not. As I've said, I do think these players will improve as we improve in front of them as well. I think these can, anyone can go in there and do well. It just depends really what we do in the transfer window. But I'm happy for a rotation system with Keane and Mina playing alongside him in worst case scenario, and then likes of Branthwaite maybe just being a bit of a backup there, maybe playing in the League Cup. But we'll see what the window brings.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, the club seemed quite keen on bringing a centre-back, which I was personally surprised about kind of going into the window, because we know we can't sign loads of players. And I thought maybe centre-back wasn't our major concern, but clearly the club are very much, they've been interested in Gabriel kind of since January. Obviously, that was before Branthwaite's breakout into the team. We've spoken in depth about Branthwaite on the player review, so if you want to hear more about that, do check out that video. Kind of, if we don't end up signing Gabriel, and then we kind of have to focus our attention elsewhere, Terry, and we don't sign a centre-back, do you kind of agree with David? Would you kind of be rotating Keane and Mina? Would you even potentially bring in Branthwaite? Who would you partner with Holgate now?
I think any of them can partner Holgate. It's only a problem if the others partner each other long term. I think Holgate can work with Mina, he can work with Keane, he can work. We haven't seen him with Branthwaite, but I wouldn't be surprised if that works as well. I know a lot of people are saying, why are we prioritising a centre-back? Because we've got, quite strong at centre-back on paper. I don't think it's about personnel. I think it's about a shape and a system and a team that you want to implement. It's like, yeah, we've got, say, 4 decent centre-backs, but he might want a particular, model of centre-back and a particular profile, type of player to fit his team vision. We haven't got one. We might have... You need an A and a B, and we might have 4 A's, and we haven't got a B. And he might just say, well, I need a B, and then we can get rid of one of the A's. I can't have, like loads of A's, if that makes sense. I personally, the lockdown performances notwithstanding, prefer Mina to Michael Keane. I think Michael Keane, gave a very good account of himself in the post-lockdown games, but I still think Mina's a better player. I think he makes a better partnership with Holgate. So I'd go with Mina and Holgate if we don't bring in Gabriel, personally.
Yeah, one of the things actually quite interesting now, we do have Ancelotti. He does kind of like Coleman to kind of tuck in almost as a third centre-back sometimes. So you'd expect Coleman to be on the right. Obviously, you could put Holgate on the left. They're clearly looking for a left-footed centre-back. So then after that, I'm not really sure how almost Mina and Keane almost kind of fit in, because obviously Holgate's your starter. You need Coleman for the balance when you are on a 4-4-2 to have an out-and-out right back. And then it almost seems like there's kind of no place left for Mina or Keane. So we'll have to see how that goes, really. I can see, to be honest, I can't actually see a sign of centre-back now. It seems like we've missed out for Gabriel. Obviously, we won't know. Apparently, he's been making his mind up for the past 4 months, and he still can't decide where he wants to go. So we'll have to see how that goes. But personally, I actually can't see us getting a centre-back now, because I think if we lose out on Gabriel, potentially we go in for Zuma. Do I want another loan for Zuma? Not really. I think we just need a signing now. It was really good when Zuma was here. We kind of we openly got rejected when we went back in from on a permanent. And I wouldn't want to see him come in on loan then kind of, maybe financially it might make sense. But I don't really want another kind of loan, kind of stopgap centre-back coming in. So we'll have to see how that one develops. And I always feel like when we talk about a player review, which is more positive, we take less time talking about them than the negative ones, which feels a bit ridiculous. But we have kind of come to the end of the video now, and kind of what I've been bracing myself for. Terry, how would you rate Mason Holgate this season?
9 out of 10.
That's definitely impressive.
That's probably me highest of the season, and it's not. Don't confuse that with. He's not a 9 out of 10 player. I just think he's had a 9 out of 10 season. I think he's been one of the brightest points of the season, because he's an asset we didn't know we had. We didn't know we had this. We all went into this season pretty much thinking, apart from the odd person, that we only had 2 centre backs plus this half a centre back in Holgate, and we were just praying he didn't get injured. And we've come out of it where he's been one of the most consistent, most impressive players. He's gone into midfield away at Old Trafford and looked so good that there's people calling for him to start in midfield now over £25 million, £45 million players. I think he's had a brilliant breakout season. Like if you look at other players around Europe who've broke out this season, like Erling Haaland's, they get the headlines because they're obviously in Europe and they're scoring goals and what have you. But I'm sure they weren't, you're sure players like him weren't brilliant from the word go, but when they took off, and I think Holgate had a similar season. It's just not as sexy because we're obviously not as good a team as Salzburg or Dortmund, and we're obviously not, winning things, and he's not a striker, but I think he's had that type of breakout season, so I'd give him a 9. I think he's been our most, with him and Calvert-Lewin, I think he's been our most impressive player this season.
Yeah, it was almost a bit Louis van Gaal there from Terry, giving his review of Holgate there. I definitely agree. I think he's been very impressive. David, what would you rate Holgate out of 10?
It could easily be a 9. I give him a solid 8 just because it's not his fault, but he didn't start the season. But the Barnsley parades, he quickly got into gear for us towards the back end of the season, and I particularly like his self-awareness as well. He reviews himself. He knows he has to do better, and that's good quality in a player. You've seen players like Lookman, I think didn't have much self-awareness. He thought he was better than he was at the time and wasn't willing to get his head down and work hard to improve. Holgate seems the opposite. He seems like a very self-aware player. He demands the best out of himself, and he knows where he wants to be in his career. So a solid 8, and I don't doubt that he's only going to get better again next season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'll go somewhere in the middle. I'll just give him like an 8.5. I mean, I'm not sure about you two, but I almost saw him potentially getting in the England team for the Euros this summer. I mean, we've spoken about, the press have spoken about, your Tarkovsky's player like that. He didn't have a brilliant season. He had another all right season, but Holgate was absolutely brilliant for me. And we won't dwell obviously too much because obviously there are no Euros this year. That'll be coming back next year. So hopefully he can have another good season. But Terry, do you agree? Did you kind of almost see him potentially bring in the England team this summer?
I don't know about the tournament, but he definitely started getting his name mentioned for the England selection, didn't he? Calvert-Lewin and Holgate. It was like a double-edged sword, really, because they were going to get called up, I think, especially Calvert-Lewin, but probably Holgate as well. They were both going to get called up in the next international break, right before the lockdown came in. But it may have also been a bit too soon to get on the plane to a tournament because they'll have only just come in the camp about 2-3 months before the tournament. It might have been too quick for them. So in a way, yeah, they've lost that momentum. But now they've got a whole extra season to force their way into. They could be, there hasn't been an England camp since that one, so the plans might still be to call the two of them up, and then they've got a whole year then to try and establish themselves and get on playing for the rearranged tournament. So, I hope they do. I'm not one of them. I don't really care about England. I think a lot of Evertonians don't if they're local to Liverpool. But I like the players to get called up to the national team because it means a lot to them, and it's sometimes a catalyst for them to perform even better, unless you're Pickford. But, but yeah, I think he would have, and I still think he can if he carries on his form into next season because. He's got time on his side. He's younger than a lot of the other players who he's competing with, and some of the other players are on the way down, like John Stones.
Yeah, I agree. David, you got anything to add there just before we end the video?
Yeah, just he's only had a handful of appearances for the if you look down the ranks as well. Then I think 8 appearances for the under-21s and 6 for the under-20s and 6 for the under-21. So he's not one of these players really that's come. He played a lot of games right down up and down the England youth system. Yeah, it's no stranger. Gareth Southgate likes players to be capable on the ball, likes them to move it from front to back pretty quickly and get a team. So obviously that's been Pickford's friend really because he's probably one of the best distributors out of the keeper we've got. Argument-wise, he's had a poor season, but his distribution continues to impress. And the stats back that up as well. Mason Holgate's got 3 assists this season as well. James Maddison has actually got 3 assists. So when you think of a really good, perceived very good attacking midfielder getting the same amounts of assists as him, he's only actually played half a season really in the first team. So yeah, I think for them reasons alone, he's a Southgate type of player, and I can see Southgate embracing him, especially Rio Ferdinand will probably be having a word in his ear as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Very, very high reviews from us all there. Mason Holgate, very impressive this season. Of course, let us know down in the comments what you thought about Mason Holgate's season. Check out David's social media, Terry's mine, all the Toffee Blues. Check out all the other videos we've been doing as well. Bringing you daily 24/7 transfer kind of rumour videos. plenty of these player reviews up on the channel, and still a couple more to come. So thank you very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.